Welcome back to EW Live. Dalton and Jessica here with you. Very excited for our next guest. It's the star, the director, wrote the screenplay, producer, one-man band in the house. His film Motherless Brooklyn opens November 1st. It's Edward Norton joining us. What's going on, man?
Pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you here.
Home in New York.
I gotta say, I'm surprised. I mean, you directed Keeping the Faith. That was 19 years ago. And I know you're a busy dude, but I remember when you did that, I said, I thought you were going to be directing a lot of films. I thought we were going to see you behind the lens a lot. And I know you've been, you've been busy, but it is surprising me it's been 19 years. Why has it been so long, and why get back now?
I don't think I intended that because I really enjoyed it the first time I did it. And I think in some ways it's just this one got rattling around in my head. I got working on the screenplay. Actually, right after I did Keeping the Faith, Fight Club took a year and a half, and then I knew I was going to do a film right after that. When I first read the book, it was just there was years ahead of me that I knew I was right. Booked up kind of happily. And so I really didn't even start considering seriously how to adapt it for a few years after it was written. And then Jonathan and I agreed on this idea of setting it in the 50s, and I needed to really research this idea of opening it up into a thing about the dark history of New York in that period. So that took a while. Because
the book's set in 99.
The book's set in 99, but the book is really a character portrait. You ride inside the head of this guy with Tourette syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder, and the plot is really twisty and turny, but it's not really about New York. It's not about something thematic. Jonathan used to call it an excuse to write the character, because what everybody remembers is the emotional relationship of being inside the head of this character with his kind of crazy condition. But in a film, obviously it's a visual medium and it's more expansive. And I said to Jonathan, I think we need to go wider than just Lionel's head. And the book has a 50s kind of style to it. The characters feel like they're trapped in a little part of Brooklyn that hasn't changed. And so then we were kind of like, well, but maybe that would be cool to really set it in the era that it feels like it's written in.
You talked about first wanting to play this character, and the character, as you mentioned, has Tourette's. He's going to blurt out words. Not just that, he's going to almost physically convulse in a way. How did you get a handle on that? How did you get a handle on what's the best way for me to make this believable, have it worked, and put these tics in the right places? Because I imagine that wasn't an easy overnight process.
Well, it's funny. There's really two challenges going on with the representation of someone with a condition, whether it's like cerebral palsy or cancer or Tourette syndrome, right? You've got to do the basic groundwork to understand the nature of the thing, but at the same time, I think all of us know that some things can slip very quickly into the Hallmark version of the thing if all you're doing is sort of the nobility of the person living through the king. If the things that are good are the ones that then deal with just the complex humanity of the person apart from the condition, and when I look at something like My Left Foot, which is not just a great performance, but a great film by a great filmmaker, Jim Sheridan, what you have there is his performance of the physical condition that Christy Brown suffered from is really great. It's very committed and amazing, but it's really a great performance because what he basically does is he ignores that and he plays a character who was sometimes a real son of a bitch, who was very lust driven, who he doesn't limit. The character is a great character because of all the complexity of his humanity that he shows you was there despite the condition. He doesn't isolate the person as like a saint just because they lived. He doesn't make him a hero because he had the condition. He makes him a hero because he refused to be defined by the condition, right? And I think that's where it gets interesting, because Lionel, this character as he's written, not only does he have gifts that flow from the condition of memory and of an ability to keep thinking about things until they unlock themselves to him. But he's also just funny and sensitive and a loyal friend and lonely, and I think those he's also a tough guy. That's the funny thing is they call him Freak Show, and he's sort of boxed in and he's underestimated. But he's like he grew up in a Catholic orphanage, and he's basically like a tough Brooklyn street
He's
kid.
got swagger.
Yeah, and I liked that about him. I liked the idea that he's not some sort of put upon wallflower who's been abused and can't take it.
How did you stumble over essentially putting Robert Moses and making him such a huge part of this movie, and the building of New York City, and the because that's a massive part of the film, as you're talking about adapting it to the 1950s.
Yeah, well, once we knew, I said to Jonathan, we can't do a book that's we can't do a film that's as in the head of the character as the book. We've got to send him into a visual story, and the thing that Jonathan and I both talked about that we think is like the actual enduring power of, let's call it noir, but of like this idea of the detective who's like a proxy for the rest of us, is that we like America is a country where everybody's invested in we're invested in the idea that we live in an idealistic system. We live in a system that's based on ideals that we're proud of. They're humanistic, progressive, and all these things. And we float along dealing with our daily lives, putting a lot of trust in that system. But every now and then we realize there is stuff going on that is not what is supposed to be happening here. People have power that we didn't give them, and now they're starting to turn it against us. That idea that in America we have to keep our eye on what's going on in the shadows. That's kind of what these noir films at their best are. And what happened in New York in the 50s, if there's any place that democracy is in action, it's in New York, except that for nearly 50 years it was run by an autocratic power boss who was never elected and was a racist, and who did things to the city that we're still dealing with today, and baked racism literally into the infrastructure of the city. And people don't, that's not part of the popular narrative about New York.
No, of course not. It also makes the story, though set, decades ago, very resonant right now, and it feels very contemporary.
Well, I hope a lot of times you can get more clarity on the history that you're living in by looking at, the past, because we have more clarity about the past. And I think that the idea of power getting amassed in places it's not supposed to be, when the danger that comes when we can't see who's actually got the power, that's a very, to me, it's not even that it's timely, it's timeless. Like that's a continuing like issue of American life, is if we want to live in a democracy, we have to stay attentive to power not getting put in the places where we didn't vote for it. Literally, like we're supposed to have the power, and if we start seeing that there's too much power and it's doing damage to us, we have to decide what we're going to do about it. You know what I mean? That doesn't change. That was true then, it's true now, and I think we happen to be. I think we're also right in the middle of the argument that this movie talks about in some measure, which is like, do we want to make heroes out of people with a lot of swagger who bully other people? Is that our definition of it? Or do we, do Americans take care of each other? Like, is that what we are going to say is heroic? And I think that's, who knows why? It's to me, it's very interesting that these cycles go on where you think we're kind of, you think we've kind of lived through Hitler and like the romance with autocrats, right? And you'd say to yourself, well, we're never going back to that. We would never be drawn to that again. And then you kind of go like, how the hell is this happening? What is it in us that's making us like attracted again to that kind of a person? And those are, to me, it's not like, to me, films that activate people are not ones that like answer everything. They're the ones that sort of stick a fork in these ideas and make people, go out to dinner and think about it and talk about it and go, well, was that really true, or did this really happen, or does this reflect this? You don't, setting these things up as questions and provocations is what makes interesting films to me.
It's a very interesting film. We could talk about this with you all day, but I know they're pulling you out. It's got great performances. It's got great score that we didn't even get to. It's got great
shots,
cinematography.
yeah, beautiful.
Motherless Brooklyn's out November 1st. Edward Norton, man, thanks for coming in and
thanks
talking
a
about
lot.
it.